is Luffy's mom? Who is his other grandfather? His grandmothers? How about his ancestors? What if I told you that Oda has been drip-feeding information on Luffy's lineage the entire story? And that not only is the Skypiea arc not skippable, but it is potentially the arc that told us more about Luffy's lineage than any other arc in the series. I found some solid and shocking evidence for all of this, as well as some fun headcanon connections sprinkled throughout. So as always, like, comment, subscribe if you're feeling the vibe, as today we're taking a deeper look into the monkey family and their lineage. Also, if you would prefer to be surprised when Oda gets around to revealing endgame ideas like this, I'd maybe cut this one off. That's not to say that this theory is 100% confirmed, of course not, it is still just a theory, but the probability of some of this being accurate, or at least a version of what I'm connecting here being accurate, is, in my opinion, very high. And with that warning, here we go.
What's up, y'all? You know what time it is? It's about to be that time.
For almost a quarter century, fans have questioned the significance of the Nolan and Calgara flashback. Despite the negativity as it was running weekly, it is a flashback that ages like wine. Imagine for a second that the reason Oda gave us this story in the first place was because it has direct ties to the main character, giving new meaning to the way Luffy moves in that arc. Wiper, the descendant of Calgara, was so determined to be the one to ring the light of Shandora. But who actually rings it? Luffy. What if Luffy is a descendant of Calgara as well? Then the idea of what Wiper wanted was achieved, and a new, deeper layer is added to that arc. The Nolan Calgara story was the first flashback in the series to not have a POV character that was still alive. And yes, I know Nola the snake survived, but they were not our POV. But speaking of snakes, Luffy was eaten by Nola, the giant snake, and Calgara's daughter Moose was set to be offered as a sacrifice and eaten by Nola's parent or grandparent Kashi, a gigantic snake that they revered as the sun god. Or at the very least, a god that, through sacrifice, would bring you to the sun god. How fitting would it be if the first person to mention the sun god in the entire story was revealed to be a direct ancestor of Luffy? Moose, by being the daughter of Calgara, could effectively be Luffy's great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-grandmother. Remember Seto? Probably not. Anyway, he was the first Shandian we were introduced to front and center in the flashback. He contracted tree fever, looked up to Calgara, and later became Moose's husband. Look at him and tell me he doesn't look like someone you know. He's quite literally a Luffy clone, and before anyone says every girl in the story is Nami, yes. But every guy in the story has fairly distinct features. People often say that Luffy and Garp look alike, but Luffy and Dragon do not. But you know who Dragon does look like? Calgara. His tattoo could be a way of getting in touch with his ancestors. Still not convinced? Remember when I talked about Hitetsu being Sukiyaki, and then the anime gave Hitetsu and Sukiyaki the same voice actors? But everyone said that doesn't mean anything because Kazuki Yao voices Django, Bon Clay, and Frankie? Well, Hidekatsu Shibata is the voice of Calgara, and he has only voiced one other character in the anime, Monkey D. Dragon. How did Garp look when we first saw him? Like this, with this dog hat on? What if this wasn't just to hide his identity from viewers, but was a layered element because the chiefs of Shandora wear similar headwear? Do you remember the first real attack that Garp used in the series? I'll tell you, it was a giant cannonball attached to a chain that he used to attack the Sunny in Post Enies lobby. Do you remember what Calgara was doing during his introduction? Attacking a ship with a giant cannonball attached to a chain. Oda was clearly drawing a connection between the monkey family and the key Shandian players. And the often forgotten character Seto has ties to the beginning of piracy. There is a particular sea in Japan called the Seto Inland Sea. During the 14th century, it was home to the most famous example of early Japanese pirates, the Murakami Kaizoku. Murakami means superior village or above the village. Both translations work as allegories for the Skypiea arc. Shandora was shot up to Skypiea, which was above their village, and the Vars became the coveted superior village in the eyes of the kami. If Seto was Luffy's ancestor, it would symbolize his bloodline having ties to the start of piracy. You might also remember in the reassembled Joy Boy theory that we talked about the Egyptian god Osiris, and how he was the descendant of the sun god Ra, and that his soul was the ram god. The merry head is a ram, the sunny is obviously a sun, Luffy has become the sun god, and the sun god was introduced by Seto's wife Moose during the Nolan and Calgara flashback. Osiris had a brother that killed him named Set, and if you put a Japanese inflection on that name, you would get Seto. This character is way more important than I believe people think. And by being the brother of Osiris, that means that Set is also a descendant of the sun god Ra. Set was the god of storms, which could connect to the will of D, because the D will always bring about another storm, something Dragon has never failed to do. The sun god Ra and Anubis are often paired and are each represented by the head of a falcon and a jackal, respectively. This ties to the Alabasta arc where we had the guardian deities Pel the falcon and Chaka the jackal, but I believe there was one more guardian deity in that arc. Luffy, who as a representation of Set, brought the storm that liberated Alabasta. And what was Luffy's final attack against Crocodile? Alright, I know somebody out there is saying, but hey, Shandians have little white wings. If all of this is true, where are Garp, Dragon, and Luffy's wings? I'm glad you asked. Because if you look at the cover of Volume 27, boom! Luffy with wings! Was this just for fun, or could this have been cheeky foreshadowing from Oda?
Can't believe it. I'm in disbelief.
When Jaya was split by the knockup stream, it cracked one particular house into two halves. The remaining half eventually became Cricket's house. Now this could be a stretch, but what if that was Moose and Seto's house? What if they already had a child? 4 years passed between Noland leaving and Shandora shooting up into Skypiea. It would be another 2 years before Nolan would return. Either way, more than enough time for a child to be born. Could that child have been orphaned on Jaya, on the side of the house that did not conjoin with Skypiea? This child would have had wings, but after 400 years of breeding with non-winged individuals, those wings would likely have stopped growing. Now, a fun reveal would be Dragon taking his cloak off, and he has wings, like a recessive trait that usually doesn't, but rarely could, pass to the next generation. How many people read Skypiea and wished that Wiper and Cricket could meet, have a drink together, buddy out? Well, if Luffy truly is a descendant of Calgara, then the spirit of that bond already happened and continued. When he arrived in Skypiea, Calgara was greeted by a Yama-looking dude claiming to be God, and Calgara challenged his claim to that title, and unfortunately was defeated. But here's his great-great-great-great-great-great-great-grandson to take down another sanctimonious god and free the people. Calgara gave Nolan gold that he ultimately left behind. Luffy went out of his way to return Cricket's gold stolen from Bellamy. A considerable parallel would be when the Shandians tried to give Luffy more gold, but once again, because of mixed messaging, it all gets left behind. But who gets the gold? Bellamy, who is coincidentally from the North Blue. Or you could say that Luffy was stealing his own birthright when he took the 300 million from Shandora. What happens during the knockup stream? The sky turns dark, and immense pressure shoots water into the sky. What happened to Leloucia? The sky turned dark and immense pressure rained from the sky. Or so we think. Take a look at the sunken aftermath of Leloucia and explain away the sunken imagery from the knockup stream, or Enies Lobby for that matter. Could what have happened to Leloucia have just been several knockup streams actually attacking from below? Or the knockup streams are just meteorological side effects from the usage of some sort of ancient weapon? Tinfoil, but what if the event that put Jaya in the sky was not an act of nature, but rather a retaliation from Nerona Imu? The king of Livneal was told about the city of gold, El Dorado, and reported it to Marijois, asking for permission to voyage into the Grand Line. That permission was granted only after Shandora was in the sky 4 years later. So hypothetically, if what happened to Jaya was, say, an act of Emu and an ancient weapon after learning through the grapevine about a golden city, then by the end of the story, when Luffy has ended the cycle of tyranny, he will have also avenged his ancestors and honored them by becoming the beacon of light, a warrior in white like the trees that guide the souls of the ancestors. And the drums of liberation could be tied to the light of Shandora, altogether adding intense meaning to the spread of Luffy in the sky as Cricket puts it all together. Also, big shout out to one of my favorite community theories, that Usopp is a descendant of Nolan. That one has been around for years and I love it. I've never seen anyone bring up the possibility of Luffy and Calgara being distantly related, but it would add so many layers to have two members of those families on the same crew 400 years later. At the end of the story, I need a book to spread across the blues called Usopp the Truth Teller, The Truthful Usopp, or a pun about him being a sniper, right? Usopp the Straight Shooter. And a fun additional connection with Moose. Her voice actress, Yuko Minaguchi, voiced one other character in the series as well, Portgas de Rouge. Ace and Luffy may not have been brothers, but based on the voice actor trajectory of predictions being correct, it's possible that they were actually distantly related. That covers the paternal side of the family. Now let's discuss the maternal side. Oda's been pretty tight-lipped about who Luffy's mom is, and no, it's not Crocodile. But beyond the Shandians, I personally believe that he has already shown us many of Luffy's other relatives. This goes back to my main central idea that since Oda only planned One Piece to be a 5 to 7 year long journey, the top tiers, themes, and major foreshadowing points were already planted in those early parts of the story. The first 100 chapters featuring the East Blue arcs are often considered a prologue, meaning the beginning of Luffy's journey really started in chapter 101, with his arrival to the Grand Line. First thing Luffy encounters on his new journey is the giant whale Laboon, and from Crocus we learn the story of Calico Yorkie and Brook's former crew, the Rumbar Pirates. Now, plenty have suggested, and I love the idea and theory, that Rox Dizabek could be Luffy's other grandfather, leading Dragon to have a child with Rox's daughter or vice versa. That's fun, and shout out to Dawn of the World for popularizing that one. But I actually have an option that would lead to even more mind-blowing analysis and full circle connections if Oda wanted to go this route. Calico Yorkie. Yes, what if Luffy's maternal grandfather was the former captain of the Rumbar Pirates, Brook's former captain, and the man who promised to see Laboon once more, Calico Yorkie? And you might be saying, Yorkie contracted an unknown illness and died. But did he? No body, no death. Also, the disease he contracted seemed to be very similar to tree fever, the disease that the Shandians contracted, which Noland was able to cure 400 years ago using the Kona tree. What if 400 years later, people had completely forgotten about this plague, its name, and how to cure it? It's not like recent events in the real world wouldn't corroborate the significance of something like that. Considering what we have seen of the connection between the Gorosei and diseases, it's not a stretch to wonder if this was all on purpose. What if Kona trees were banned and cut down by the world government to aid with cleansings? Either way, that disease creates a clear connection between the Yorkie flashback and the Calgara flashback. Seto and the Shandians were covered in spots on their bodies. Yorkie was covered in spots on his body. A member of the Rumbar Pirates makes a point to tell us that he probably got the disease from the jungle they landed at earlier. There is nothing that you can tell me that will have me believe that Yorkie did not contract tree fever, and that the death of Noland was probably also the death of modern botany, leading to the disease being a mystery centuries later. So if these connections are true, or for the sake of this argument we pretend that Yorkie is Luffy's other grandfather, then lines like Luffy immediately saying his crew member priority was a musician could be a hint to this, that music is in his blood, making it super ironic that he can't sing or play an instrument, but he still tries, right? Moreover, if Yorkie is Luffy's grandfather, then that adds so much meaning to Brook, pledging his life to Luffy, unknowingly vowing to protect his dear friend's grandson. Another crazy connection, Garp's hat is a dog, his ship's figurehead is a dog, and a Yorkie is a type of dog. Was Oda trying to tie a dog theme to Luffy's grandparents? In chapter 104, Crocus tells Laboon to stop waiting for Yorkie, and who is on the cover page of that chapter? Garp.
Did you know dog spelled backwards is God?
Now, Oda does not plan everything out ahead of time, but he did know that Garp would be Luffy's grandfather because Garp was in the original pilot of One Piece called Romance Dawn. So deliberately putting one of Luffy's grandfathers on the cover page of a chapter where you're discussing Luffy's other grandfather is big brain. It's as if Oda was creating a generational promise with Laboon. The best evidence for this idea is that we never see Yorkie die. The Rumbar pirates simply cast this man out to sea and leave him to die in a very specific stretch of sea, the Calm Belt. But there are islands in the Calm Belt. Ruscaina's one of them, he wouldn't want to go there, and another is Amazon Lily. It is highly plausible that he could have docked at Amazon Lily while sick and have been nursed to health. As we saw with Luffy's mushroom disease, the Kuja have a firm grasp on medicine and how to use their foliage to combat disease. The government had a hell of a time reaching islands in the Calm Belt until just the past few years when they started lining their hulls with sea stone. So, if there truly was an order to destroy Kona trees to stop people from getting healed from tree fever, Amazon Lily would be exempt from that due to their country being unaffiliated with the world government. So let's say hypothetically Yorkie sails into the Calm Belt, lands at Amazon Lily, is nursed to health by a Kuja tribe member, she gets lovesickness and is forced to leave. Is there a Kuja that would fit this description and be of the proper age to fall in love with Yorkie? There is. And it's a character that Oda has already shown us is intended to be more important than everyone initially believed. Gloriosa. What if Granny Nyan was quite literally Luffy's granny? What if Gloriosa and Calico Yorkie had a daughter who eventually met Monkey D. Dragon and they had a son? Gloriosa even uses the line, "Love is always a hurricane," and says it is an Eastern phrase, meaning she is well acquainted with the East Blue, the sea that her potential son-in-law would be from. We know that Gloriosa was a former empress, she was exiled, replaced by Shaki, fought in God Valley 38 years ago, and did not return until she found Hancock, Sandersonia, and Marigold 15 years ago. So what if 52 years ago Yorkie is nursed back to health by Gloriosa? She gets banished, and they live together somewhere, or travel in search of the Rumbar pirates. She gives birth sometime after, which would make their child 3 to 4 years younger than Dragon, who would have been 17 during God Valley, and a potential child of Yorkie and Gloriosa could have been 13 to 14 years old around the same time. God Valley took place in the West Blue, where Yorkie, Brook, and the Rumbar pirates are from. What if he was involved? It is unlikely that Yorkie would have known the specifics of what happened to the crew. It was the Florian Triangle, so what if joining that job intrigued him because it would allow him to look for his friends, thinking they likely returned home from their journey? More on that in a bit. A good and fair counter to this idea is that Gloriosa clearly calls Luffy by his full name. So shouldn't she know that this is her potential grandson? Perhaps. But Gloriosa makes no effort to mention her connection to Monkey D. Garp and how she fought against him at God Valley either. Plus, no one knew that Dragon and Garp were father and son until Luffy is publicly revealed to be Dragon's son and Garp's grandson during Marineford. And despite having been a Marine, it would seem that up until that point, Dragon to the greater world was just simply Dragon. After Marineford, he became more widely known as Monkey D. Dragon. So maybe Gloriosa never knew Dragon's full name, or she never knew who her daughter had a child with anyway. Perhaps she went looking for her daughter in the East Blue and never found her. But don't worry, I've got some fun ways to make all of this make sense as we continue expanding this idea. The same year that Luffy is born is the same year that Boa, Sandersonia, and Marigold are captured by the world government. Luffy was born in May of 1505. Hancock was born in September of 1493. When Luffy was born, she would have been 11. Hancock said she was captured and became a slave in Marijua when she was 12, which means it happened shortly after Luffy was born. The Fisher Tiger breakout was 4 years later. We still have the missing Kuja Empress. We know Gloriosa, then Shaki, then Unknown, then Hancock. Could Luffy's mother have been the Unknown Empress for a time? Was she also captured when Hancock was? Since I believe that Granny Nyan could actually be Luffy's grandmother, could the vitriol between Hancock and Gloriosa stem from Hancock's inability to process that she was potentially responsible for the death or capture of Gloriosa's daughter? Oda revealed that he originally intended Amazon Lily to be a final saga island, meaning everything with Amazon Lily has endgame ties. Which brings us full circle to Yorkie at the beginning of it all. And if you're wondering why I'm so hell-bent on connecting Luffy to Amazon Lily, it's because Kuma sent him there. When Kuma arrives at Thriller Bark, he asks Nami if it's true that Luffy has a brother. Why? Because Kuma already knew about Luffy, and only Luffy. Kuma would likely know who Luffy's mother is or was, so just as he slapped everyone else to learn more about their craft or themselves, Kuma slaps Luffy to Amazon Lily, indicating that it must be a safe place where Luffy could gain something. Insight on where he comes from is the only thing that makes sense to me outside of hockey, but it is implied that the Kuja only give birth to women. But what if Luffy was the first male born to a Kuja in centuries, adding fire to the Chosen One flames? A key thing about the Calm Belt and Amazon Lily is that it resides in an area known for being entirely devoid of wind. So having Dragon fall in love with the previous Kuja Empress or somebody with ties to Amazon Lily brings a layer of irony, considering Dragon has been associated with wind ever since his introduction. His ship is called the Wind Grandma, and one of the oldest theories in One Piece is that Dragon has the wind fruit. I could see a cute little scene between Dragon and Luffy's mom where he's actually introducing her to the concept of wind, because it may be something she had never seen in her life, if she never left Amazon Lily. A question that has been asked for years is, could Calico Yorkie still be alive? It's possible. He sailed into the Calm Belt, that's all we know. He certainly wouldn't have been able to stay at Amazon Lily, no men allowed. So if he and Gloriosa were actually an item, they would have had to settle elsewhere. And what about Laboon? That's a great question. Why wouldn't Yorkie go see him? The One Piece way would imply that he found a purpose stronger than seeing Laboon, a duty, tinfoil. But what if Calico Yorkie is the man marked by flames? Could the last obstacle to get to Laugh-Tale be a man who was introduced to us by the very man who introduced us to Laugh-Tale? We didn't know anything about Laugh-Tale until Crocus told us about the final island, so could Crocus's friend be the guide to get there? That's a wild take, but the type of full-circle storytelling that I expect from Oda. Add the extra layer that Luffy could be Yorkie's grandson and the whole thing starts frying minds. What if the events of God Valley triggered Yorkie's need to become the man marked by flames, something so important that he had to sacrifice his life with Gloriosa, with his child, to protect the future so his eventual grandson could save the world, mirroring how Brook was stuck in the Florian Triangle. Yorkie would also be sailing around the Grand Line in isolation. And if Yorkie really was there at God Valley, then the reliable source Crocus mentioned could be Roger. All Crocus knows is that Yorkie left the Grand Line. He doesn't know why. There's certainly holes and gaps in time that need to be answered, but the structure and meaning behind these ideas work for me. I still would have preferred Saul to be the man marked by flames, but it seems implied that it is someone else. And should it turn out to be Yorkie, having the musically themed Kid and Killer be the first ones to mention him is a fun connection. To clean things up a bit, what if Yorkie and Gloriosa, like every One Piece parent, had important things to handle that didn't make time for being parents? So they took their child to Amazon Lily or elsewhere, and much like every child in One Piece, left them to be raised by different parents. Or what if there was a mandate that all women of Kuja blood must be raised on the island, and considering that Gloriosa was banished, she would have to relinquish her daughter to the tribe to follow the rules of her people. Whether she became the missing empress or not, it would allow her to fall in love with Dragon and leave Gloriosa completely unaware of events in her daughter's life. In the hypothetical scenario where Luffy's mother was the missing empress, what if Hancock and the others were captured shortly after Luffy's birth because the world government specifically targeted Luffy's Amazonian mother due to her connection with Dragon? Ginny was captured within a year of the Fisher Tiger escape. So what if the person who captured Ginny was someone who also captured Luffy's mom and basically started looking for another woman connected to Dragon because he broke his other toy? Gloriosa finds Hancock and her sisters and could learn the truth of what happened to her daughter, living her days out on Amazon Lily, shrinking and becoming the broken, worst timeline version of herself. A character like Suru, in theory, should be around the same age as Gloriosa, except one clearly aged more gracefully than the other, implying that something really terrible happened to Gloriosa that we have yet to learn about. Lastly, let's discuss the members of Luffy's family we actually know, Garp and Dragon. Dragon specifically has yet to make his move, proving to be in some cases even more mysterious than Shanks. What is so important? Why didn't he save Kuma, Ginny, depending on the scenario, potentially his own wife and mother of his child? These are questions that will be answered once we learn the truth of this world, and what role Dragon is playing in fixing it. There are plenty of fictional stories with tropes like this. In Percy Jackson, Percy's father is Poseidon. But since Poseidon is watching over the entire ocean, he can't really be a father to Percy. His job is too important. Clark Kent can barely raise his son or go to his baseball games because he's out saving the world and sometimes other planets and timelines as Superman. It could be a similar idea. Dragon can't be there for Luffy because everything he's doing in the background is too important to walk away from. When we see Dragon actually make a move, it will be because we are truly in the end game of the story. We've learned enough about Dragon's past to put a rough image together. He was a Marine at one point, then defected because of some unknown event or because he gained some knowledge of something that he was previously unaware of and created the Freedom Fighters. When Ohara happened, Dragon arrived with flowers to specifically pay respects to Clover, and seeing that destruction triggered a rage inside of him, leading to the creation of the Revolutionary Army, citing Robin as the light of that revolution, the spark. Dragon is known as the most dangerous and wanted man in the world, but the most dangerous thing in the world of One Piece is information. The truth is dangerous to the world government. A Buster Call was invoked against Egghead because Vegapunk was researching the history of the world. But for Dragon to be more dangerous than Vegapunk, he must know just as much or more about the past. Could Clover have been Dragon's Shanks, the man who wasn't his parent but set him on his path? What if the scholars of Ohara were all key members of the Freedom Fighters, and the genocide of Ohara was Dragon's first big loss against the government? This was all before Luffy was even born, but what if Dragon already had a child at this point? What if the flowers that Dragon brought were also for a former flame? One specific casualty of Ohara was exactly the same age as Dragon, Nico Olvia. They were both born in 1469, each were 25 years old in 1494 when Nico Robin was born, and 33 in 1502 when the Ohara incident occurred. Nico Robin could reasonably be Dragon's daughter and Luffy's half-sister. Where else did the raven-colored hair come from? Dragon could have mourned for 3 years and had a second child at 36 years old. But if Robin was Dragon's firstborn, and he believed her to be dead, then I could see why he would call her the light of the revolution. Her supposed death was the spark for him to stop being a pacifist. Kuma must know this as well, because he sent Robin to Tequila Wolf specifically so she could link up with the Revolutionary Army, meaning both Luffy and Robin could have been sent away by Kuma to learn more about their families. It's while Robin is with the team at Tequila Wolf that the Revolutionary Army learns that Dragon is Luffy's father, which is a fun connection if you're trying to hide another connection in plain sight. One of the craziest clues that Robin could be Dragon's daughter was right after Dressrosa, when Dragon was getting briefed by Koala on what happened, and he only cared to ask how Robin was doing. Dragon's aesthetic is likened to Che Guevara or Fidel Castro, and Robin's vibes and attack names are all Latina-coded. Robin's desire to uncover more about the D-Clan could be tied to an innate desire to know more about her own lineage, and why shouldn't she be considered an enemy of the gods? She is the only character actively opposing the government who can read the poneglyphs. Sukiyaki doesn't count because he doesn't want anything to do with uncovering the truth, making Robin the most dangerous woman in the world. And her near billion-berry bounty is now proof of that. There's a poetry to having Robin travel the world since she was 8, thinking that she had absolutely no family at all, only to learn that she's been sailing with her brother this whole time. It would be a cathartic layer for her character, and since the seeds are already planted in the story, it doesn't negatively change the way I look at either of them. It only enhances their bond for me. This also adds a further layer of symbolism when you consider that Robin's first adventure with the Straw Hats is at Skypiea, where during her archaeological adventure, she is actually discovering Shandora, the home of her ancestors as well. It could also be a situation where Robin is actually of Mont Blanc descent. I'm not as fond of that idea, but her discovering Shandora in the sky would tie everything together for Noland. Everyone wants to ask about Luffy's mother, but I think it's just as important to ask about Dragon's mother. I've always felt that Garp's disdain for the celestial dragons had to have something to do with the love of his life, who he was potentially married to. We know we're in for a tragic Garp backstory at some point, and I think one way or another Garp fell in love with the celestial dragon, and his initial disdain for them either came from higher-ups putting a stop to their forbidden love, or his wife got jinnied. She was taken from him, turned into a celestial concubine, and he couldn't beat the system to save her. This would motivate Dragon to want to stop them as well. Imagine this already happened by God Valley and she was there. What if the reason Garp protected the celestial dragons was only because he was trying to protect his former love, but it meant he also had to protect her new husband, her assaulter, her owner? The layers of that go dark and deep for sure. And if Roger knew this and respected Garp enough, he would try to protect her as well, tying their families together. If Roger helped protect Garp's former love, then it would explain why Garp would take Roger's son. He owed him. So, Luffy could be part Celestial Dragon, or at least tangentially connected to them. I prefer the Ginny angle over the Forbidden Love story, but either works. Something about Luffy was just as troublesome for Garp as Ace was. Why would Garp hide Luffy in the woods with bandits unless he felt that the government would also try to hunt his grandson, his real one, his legitimate one? Something is either very important about Luffy's lineage or Garp knows the truth about the Nika fruit, considering that Garp didn't throw Luffy into the woods until after he ate the fruit. For Ace, it's a cut and dry sense of the father trope. Is it the same for Luffy? If Dragon knows the true history, just as Roger did, and the government had an entire baby hunt to destroy Roger's bloodline, then Garp and Dragon must have known how relentlessly the government would go after Luffy if they knew their connection. This could explain why Luffy was put into hiding and why Dragon has been an absent father. The fewer connections between all of them, the better. But this could also explain why Garp was so hell-bent on Luffy and Ace becoming Marines. It might have been Garp's only recourse to protect them. If they vowed to bend the knee to the world government's flag, then Garp's thinking might have been that it could have saved their lives. Dragon said a child is a parent's weakness. That's a very specific mindset to have, which means it is either something drilled into him by someone else, or he learned a powerful lesson before having Luffy. Maybe we'll learn that what happened to Garp's wife was Dragon's fault, or perhaps Garp got his signature face scar protecting his son. In either case, Dragon was the weakness, as a child. Even if Dragon is or isn't Robin's father, it's reasonable to think he knew Olvia, and maybe her actions of trying to save everyone, including Robin, sit with him. But considering Dragon's first lines in the series are echoes of Roger's words, it could be a takeaway from the baby hunt against Ace, unless Roger had a bigger impact on Dragon's life than we've been led to believe. An interesting connection is the implication that the Freedom Fighters were established in 1499, or at the very least based on Chapter 1097, that's the year Dragon became a wanted man. The same year, another very important event happened. Roger found the One Piece and disbanded his crew. Is there a correlation? Even though Dragon left the Marines, we know from Chapter 432 that Garp and Dragon still talk from time to time, so if anyone knew about Ace, I would assume it would be Garp's son, but considering Garp never addressing Robin is a bit of a plot hole in my theory here, what if they both have their secrets from each other? What if Dragon knew about the baby hunt, but not that Garp protected the child? And vice versa, what if Dragon never told Garp about Robin, and only through the grief of thinking he lost a child did he invite Garp into Luffy's life? All I know is that for a character with as few lines in the series as Dragon, every word is a clue into his past and way of thinking. I often go back to the scene where they speak of Robin's father. In the official, it makes it seem as if he could still be alive, given credence to the Dragon is Robin's father idea. If you can't leave your child, don't come. We'll fulfill your husband's wishes. This whole idea echoes a child is a parent's weakness. Now, older translations translated this as, we'll take care of your husband's unfulfilled wish. This angle implies that Robin's father could be dead at this time. When I consider this angle, I start to wonder if Garp had another child. Could Dragon actually be Robin's uncle instead? Garp was 23 years old when he had Dragon. If Dragon had an older brother who was obsessed with the true history, someone he looked up to that died, I could see that being a trigger to galvanize him as well. But whether Robin is related to the monkey family or not, she is most certainly of important lineage. Nico Olvia tells us this by asserting that she will not abandon the will of those who came before her, the will of her predecessors. Robin will be revealed to be a D, I guarantee it. And Robin being related to Luffy could be the icing on the cake. And for that matter, what even is the D? What does it stand for? Does it stand for anything? I have always felt that it could be a sideways smile or a crescent moon, that much like the hieroglyphs that are hidden all throughout One Piece, it's actually a symbol.
How about that D, baby?
My favorite parts of all of this have got to be the Calgara, Seto, Moose, Shandian connections, and should those ring true, it would mean that Mont Blanc Noland is one of the most important characters in the entire series. Because had he never healed the Shandians of their tree fever, they would have died. And Luffy would have never been born to save the world 400 years later. You gotta love the butterfly effect. Vegapunk revealed that Joy Boy was the first pirate, and the Mother Flame is clearly visible on the moon hieroglyphs in the Enel cover story, next to what has always been theorized to be Shandians. We've always known that Shandora was at the very least tied to the Ancient Kingdom, but a fun, gut-wrenching twist could be that the Shandians were at one point an advanced race of people with high-tech weaponry, medicine, and machines, only for their loss 800 years ago to be so drastic that 4 centuries later, they're fighting with sticks and holding sacrificial rituals like savages. If Joy Boy was a Shandian, then not only would Luffy be spiritually the successor by having awakened the Nika fruit, he could potentially be a successor by blood as well. I personally can't wait to learn more about the history of everything and everyone. And if you stayed here until the end, you must be feeling the vibe. So if you wouldn't mind, it would really help me out if you hit the like button, drop a comment below about your favorite connection of mine, a thought or connection of your own, or just write anything. Hi, algorithm, ... an emoji. I would love to see this video be my first theory to break 100,000 views. And with your help liking, commenting, and even sharing if you feel so inclined, maybe we'll get there. Thanks, and I'll see you next time, everyone. Like, comment, subscribe if you're feeling the vibe.
I've been swimming deep, deep. Savage.